to raise your hand or leave it in the chat, and I'll get to the questions there. All right. So last week we talked a lot about, last minute pricing, minimum prices, far out, why I don't like booking, recency factor, occupancy-based adjustment, orphan nights, uh, talked about all that kind of stuff. So if you haven't seen it, make sure to go watch last week's call. So we're going to start off as safety minimum price. So I'm talking about features that I use versus ones I don't use. If I do use them, why I use them, where I pull the information from. And then, yeah, I'm just going to go through each of them. All right, so first we're going to talk about safety minimum price, dynamically increasing minimum price for future dates based on historical booking and market trends. So I don't use this feature just because my minimum price over here on the left next to my base price, for the most part, I want to control that. I'm not going to have it change. I change it, mostly it's like slow season or high season. That's about the only differences or time of year that I'm going to change that. I'm a little bit more aggressive in the slow season, obviously. Um, you're allowing more accepting of lower rates versus high season where you're not as likely to get super last minute bookings. And even the ones you are, they can be at a little bit higher rate. But typically my minimum price stays, I mean, throughout the whole year, maybe $20 difference, $40 difference is about all that I really adjust it to. So this is not a feature that I find very useful. Next, we have demand factor sensitivity. So this one in this is going to be based off of, sports events that are going on, holidays, anything that PriceLabs can determine based off of history and future rates that pricing on this date last year had increased X amount, I don't know, 20%, 100%, 500%. And then this year, they can already start to tell that that day is getting booked at a higher rate than the average day would. So they're able to kind of find the median of those two. So they have different options here. You could put no demand factor. That's obviously not an option. You want to make sure you put something conservative, moderately conservative, recommended, and then aggressives. In 95% of the markets that I've done pricing for, it's going to be conservative to moderately conservative. When they added this feature, like 2 years ago around this time, they should have just called it standard, considering so many markets are just going to be on the conservative side. But for markets that are more in the areas like very heavy vacation markets, like Fort Lauderdale, like places like Hawaii, ones that people are going to for a longer period of time. Like they don't really have a huge weekend versus weekday difference. They're pretty steady across the board. Those are the ones that are going to be on the more recommended side as their determination is more based off of like, spring break and longer periods of time that are pretty consistent each year versus like home football game or things like that. So the way you determine this is if, let's say, so when I first start setting everything up and I'm going through these settings, what I'm going to do is, you just put it to something, right? You can put it to recommended, and then you go back and you look at your pricing and you go and look at the demand. So if you're looking at the calendar, and on the very bottom here, it tells you with the different colors on the calendar what they mean, right? So the orange is like low demand, yellow normal, green is good demand, and blue is high demand. So on those high demand, that demand factor sensitivity is determining how much the price is increased. So if you were to hover over any of the numbers, it'll tell you right here that based on demand factor, because for this property, I have it set to recommended, it's increasing demand by 62% because that's what it's determined that based on, you know, last year's week of New Year's and this year's, existing bookings already, that it's needs to do a 62% increase to stay competitive. That's what they're seeing. But what you'll notice in most of your guys' markets is that recommended is putting the price too high. So how do you determine that? You just go and check your pricing. You go and check your pricing for these blue dates, see what your like high demand week is pricing for versus your competitors. And what you'll likely notice, and again, majority of the markets, if you set it at recommended, you'll probably notice that I mean, the numbers can vary tremendously, but you might be across the board $100 too high or $300 too high because they're overestimating. A lot of the time their recommendations are like skyrocket overestimations. But for some of these really heavy vacation markets, it does work a little bit better. So then you go down to moderately conservative. You check that one. You're like, okay, well, I know my price needed to come down $50 or $100. So we go to demand factor sensitivity, we go to moderately conservative, we can review changes. And then we're like, great, well, that brought it down on a couple of these key weekends that I noticed where my pricing was too high. If that's the only places your pricing was too high and this made enough of a difference to be competitive, then leave it at that. You might have to go even a little bit more conservative. That brought those weekends down even more because that's mostly when it's skyrocketing, right? It's the weekends, it's the high demand is going to be on weekends or special holiday weeks and everything. So just determine which one that you need your pricing to be closer to. You could just, review it, save it, go back, check your pricing again, come back. Or if you know that it just needed to come down, $50, then you can determine that based off of what you could see here. So think of conservative as standard. Standard, moderately standard. Conservative, I think, is a little bit harsh for what a lot of people assume that it means in this case. Okay, next is also going to be seasonality. These things play together. Did I leave this one? Yeah, same. Okay. So seasonality is what PriceLabs can determine, when your lower prices are going to be, when your higher prices are going to be, and then anything outside of that is considered shoulder. So again, in most markets, this is going to be conservative. If you were to make it more conservative, it's just going to make your pricing a little bit more even keel across the board. Or in this case, even in this market, even brought it up. Conservative assumed that it was up. So their recommendations in this case were that prices are a little bit lower, that the conservative rates are a little bit higher, which is surprising. Review. Normally you see it the opposite direction. When you turn it to conservative, it's going to be lower than recommended. But in this case, it's not, which is why it's worth looking at the review option over here. But again, don't just look at this part. This just helps you identify how it's adjusting up or down. And then you go the best way, the source of truth is going to be on Airbnb itself. It's looking at your comps, it's looking at your profile and seeing what your pricing is for that period of time. Look at multiple periods of time to determine, okay, does my seasonality need to bring my price down or need to come up? Look at low season, high season, across the board. Next is seasonal profile. So I don't find this to be a super useful tool, considering there's already seasonality factor and demand factor. And because nowadays you used to be able to determine a base price when you turned on seasonality factor. And now it doesn't allow you to do that, it just allows you to do a minimum maximum for like if you wanted to do, high season May through July and increase these both, that's something that you can set. But you already have seasonality factor being applied. So in theory, that's already increasing the rates. If you were to notice that, I feel like it's one or the other. It doesn't really make sense to do both. But if you determine that it's not applying your seasonality correctly and you want to do it manually, and you're like, nope, it's not just June and July, it's actually April through July is when I really started to notice an increase. Then you can come in here and manually create those seasonality factors instead of relying on their demand. It's more of a, again, seasonal, custom season. So I don't really use this. I'm more watching it day to day or a couple days. Okay, so weekend adjustments. This is how you determine your weekends. Weekends are Friday, Saturday. People leave on Sunday. They're not going to pay a premium. This is just identifying when those high demand premium days are. I don't set, personally, this is like some people do, some people don't set a weekend minimum. Um, I did for on some of my properties at one point, like I would do $85 minimum on the weekday and 120 on the weekend. But the way that I have my minimum set right now, my discounts are right now, my prices never go below that. And then keep in mind too, any minimums that you set on PriceLabs, they do not, if you apply more discounts on Airbnb, the minimum is non-existent. Like if you were to apply a 30% discount on PriceLabs and then add an additional 20% on Airbnb, there's no minimum there that you're able to set. So it'll go as low as it needs to hit that additional 20%. So I personally do not find this one useful. Not a big deal if you want to use it. If you don't, just for a safeguard, that's okay if you want to use that. Um, Adjacent factor, something to note too that I should have mentioned a long time ago is they do have this learned more section here. So I've been through a majority of these and watched all the videos that they offer, which is why I'm able to explain these. They all offer PriceLabs has an entire YouTube channel full of hundreds of videos that you can watch on every part of their entire software. Anyway, so Jason factor, it just means that like, let's say you want every time you get a booking, you want the price on both ends of that, the day before check-in, the day before checkout to be set at a lower price. It can be set at a percentage or at a fixed rate. Um, I do this for my San Antonio property. I have it set that on both sides, it'll be dropped to like $89, right? That's what works for my property. That helps me get those orphan nights filled. It also helps me make it a little bit less work if somebody were to come and say they wanted to extend a day for a discount, which I offer to my guests, then it just creates a little bit less work. The problem is if it does this fixed number $80 within blank days of reservation. They have this option now where it's weekends. This wasn't around when I initially set it up, but what I don't like is if I have a booking that's, 4 months in advance and then it reduces the price to $89, then there's potential where I'm losing a lot of money when that could be like a Monday through Wednesday and then Thursday's $89 and then the rest of the weekend's normal price. Then I'm basically giving away Thursday for no reason. So I personally choose to do this more manual if I'm going to offer additional discounts. I prefer to offer it to the guest and then go in there and change it once they've agreed to it. Because it's not automated anyways, so I have to do manual work anyways. Okay, day of the week pricing adjustments. This is very much dependent on the market, I've noticed. I used to set every single day to a certain percentage based on what I was seeing in the market dashboard, but I have been noticing that their recommendations are doing a lot better than they used to. So this is when I say that I don't follow the recommendations 100%. I don't follow it even probably 50% of the time, but I do look at it. I look at it to determine like, okay, are they pulling good information? And the way you determine that is to come in here. Well, sorry, back up. If you turn it off, it's actually on. So it's automatically applying their recommendation. And then if you wanted 0, you just leave it like this, or you can do it manually across the board. So the way that I like to determine, I'm sure. Okay. The way that I like to determine what the day of the week pricing adjustments should be, if I'm going to go look at it myself, is I'm going to come in here and let's say this is a 4-bedroom property. We're going to apply. They have a chart in here. This is the market dashboard where you can, has tons and tons of data. The idea is this is where PriceLabs, like all of their automations and their AI is all retrieving information. Like this is the information they're pulling off of. This is their data. This is why I love PriceLabs so much, is because it's all forward information. It shows you right here where they're pulling their information from. The length of stay, we're looking at day of the week occupancy. So if you go to day of the week, I like pricing factor here. If you went through these numbers, these are not the numbers that you need to have, but they help me determine what I want to have as a discount or premium. So if I went and I found the median of all these numbers, from 270, 292, 268, found the median of all these, then I can determine what percentage is needed to decrease the number down to 263. And let's say that's, 7%. Let's say that's a 7% decrease. Then I know on Tuesdays, majority of the time I'm going to need a 7% decrease in my rate. So I can go back and I can say, okay, Tuesdays is a negative 7%. So you go through here. This is how I start it. I go through and I do that, find the median, find the difference in the price, what percent that is. And then I go into Airbnb and I go and compare those rates. When I'm comparing prices, I always go Monday through Wednesday, right? Because those are your discounted days. Those are your cheapest days of the week. And then Friday through Sunday, 'cause those are your premium rates. And I do this to help identify where the issue is. If I look Monday through Saturday and I notice that my pricing's a little bit off, well, is it off during my weekday pricing or my weekend pricing? I don't know. I can't separate that. So I want to look at the difference between my premium prices and my discount prices. If you want to figure out if their recommendations make sense, then you can skip this first. Doing this one first, just go and see what their options are right now. Go and check, on Airbnb or competitors. If they seem to be accurate, great. If they don't, which does happen, I don't know. For this one, I would say it's kind of 50-50 on this rule. Sometimes they can be right on track where I don't need to mess with it a lot. Other days it can completely off. So you just have to check it. Pricing offset, set a fixed in percentage price change on the final recommendation. Let's see this one. I don't remember what this one is. Customization allows user to fix price to adjust recommended price after all customizations have been applied. This feature is especially useful for ensuring comparable pricing across different channels and increasing prices on specific channels. Okay. Mm, let's watch this video together. I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear it because I have headphones in. Can you guys hear that?
No. No, we can hear it.
No. Let's see. Did you hear that?
No.
No. Okay. Okay, well, never mind. I'm just gonna share this one so you guys can watch it if you would like. Before you start, available for all PriceLabs users. Customization applies after all price investment. Goods fixed price overrides or remains applies after minimum maximum also. Hmm. We're gonna skip this one. I'm assuming that if this were to be a child listing or a second listing, like if you had Airbnb set up and then you had Verbo set up in PriceLabs and you weren't using a property management system, this would give you the option to have the same settings as your Airbnb listing, but then you can increase it all by like 15% or 8% or whatever the additional site may be without having to go and manually adjust it each time. Running to the nearest 0 of 5 just to make the numbers look more clean. Or this gives you a sense. I want whole numbers. Smoothing the identical price to specific periods, such as nights of the week. Again, not necessary. It's already kind of already set up. We don't need to mess with that. Doesn't really do anything. We don't want Monday through Wednesday to be the same price. We want it to be dynamic. We want it to adjust. Mondays are going to be your slowest part of the week. So if we had it the same as Wednesday, then the pricing would be a little bit too high, or Wednesday's pricing would be too low. And this is a new feature here. No prices updates for unavailable nights. Retain last synced price for new bookings blocked from the time the setting is turned on until they become available again due to cancellation. So I believe this one is going to be, this is the newer one. And let's say you got a booking. Let's say you just got this booking and it adjusts your price here based on like it continues to adjust the price based if you didn't have a booking. Like if I were to go increase my price $200, these rates would still increase. So it's supposed to help it keep the same just to help you visualize what you're actually getting if you don't have any discounts on other sites. Okay, so that is the majority of the settings. That is all of the settings inside of PriceLabs. Again, PriceLabs is not something that you have to it's not set it and forget it. It's not automated. It allows you to create a base price and basically formulas for that to adjust in your calendar. It is for you to babysit. In the beginning, highly, highly recommend that you look at it every 2 to 3 days. And eventually after 3 months, 6 months, I look at mine once a week. Every Monday, I go through each of my properties and I go through and make sure, like, I look at the next 6 months. I make sure that they all still look like they're all pretty competitive as well. That helps me determine that I'm not missing anything. I'm not missing any high demand weekends. I'm not missing anything for the next 6 months if I keep up looking at it. And I'm just babysitting. PriceLabs does not often underprice properties, but it does overprice. I do notice that. Like sometimes you'll come and look at a high demand weekend and it'll be way, way overpriced. And by the time it could be one time, it could be one weekend in the next 6 months. Even though you have your formula right and your all your settings and your base price, everything else looks good. There could be one weekend where they just over determines the demand factor and you didn't catch it and now you didn't get it booked at a premium rate. So it's good to go and continue to just babysit it. Okay. So just as an example of like, this is an extreme example, but as a lot of you know, I came into the program as a client. My first property was in Glendale, Arizona, the same year the Super Bowl was going on there. So I use this example a lot, but during that time, like it was, as soon as January hit, my next 3 months was booked. And I didn't understand pricing at the time the way that I do now, right? So I thought, this is fantastic. I'm just getting booked up. This is awesome. Great. I didn't even realize that like Super Bowl was happening. Now I know if I could have increased my rate because I was just giving them away. But it was still a great period of time. Well, as I mentioned, Super Bowl was that, during whatever, February or March or whenever it was, and people were getting like $20,000 a weekend. There were some houses that were getting that, homes with pools and all the bells and whistles were getting crazy amounts of money. And PriceLabs saw that, and all these sites saw that. So next year, that next spring, they went and because the year before was like a 2000% increase in demand, that next year, even though demand was not that high, like it was still high, but it wasn't, it might have been 50% or 100% increase, but they just did a median of that. So my prices for like 3 months were still like 1500% too high. And I had to manually go in because all that their system can do is take historical data based on what they're seeing in the future and find a median in there. They don't have it doesn't have the knowledge to be able to determine, okay, this event is no longer happening just because it happened last year. That was a one-time occurrence. So that is why we continue to focus or continue to monitor this. We're just babysitting it. Does anybody have questions about the PriceLabs customizations over here? And if not, we're going to go into the market dashboard. Okay. So let's go into market dashboard. So I would see what it looks like when you first bring it up. It's going to look like this. You're not going to have all these properties like I do, but you're going to be able to go in and create a property. If you don't have one yet, you're going to have one free credit. It's going to last for a month. And then after that, it's $10 a month if you only have 1,000 or less listings. So if you're looking at a particular property, you don't really need more than 1,000 listings within that radius. If you were looking at an entire market, like I'm looking at the entire Houston market, I pay more because I want to see all of my options. I use PriceLabs and Market Dashboard just like I would use AirDNA data. Like it's just a source of information. So anyways, you would go in, you would put in your address or the city or whatever you want, and then go through all the steps and then wait for it to load. Once it loads, you can come in here and you can create a comp set. We have other videos about that. I'll do comp videos at a different time, but it helps you, like it goes through a lot of information. So where do we start here? If you were looking at basic information, so such as like seasonality or, kind of like wide averages, um, then you really can have a pretty wide filter for your bedroom count. If I have a 4 bedroom, I need to have enough properties for PriceLabs to pull information from. If I make my filters extremely strict and it's pulling information from like 4 properties, like that's not providing me good averages. And so I like to do like 3 to 5 bedrooms. This is going to get me a couple hundred properties. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm not looking to like bet my life on these numbers. I'm looking for just an idea. So even when we come into like, average revenue or average RevPAR, so this just helps me identify, okay, this year, August, September, October are going to be my slower months, and then I'm going to increase and go into March, and then I'm going to go back down, and summer is going to be okay. So in this case, doesn't matter if we're looking at 2023, 2024, 2025. August, September, October are always going to be your slower months. Shoulder season is those mid revenue seasons. And then obviously high season, highest is going to be February and March. This is for Bradenton, Florida. This is not like for every market. This is just how I read this if you're looking at this kind of information. Um, RevPAR is revenue per available room. I don't particularly use this one. Average daily rate, if you were looking on a monthly basis, this is pretty helpful. Revenue average or estimated average occupancy. This is also slightly helpful. We look at the same thing on AirDNA, like what is the area most likely to get for each month. As we can see, it's still lowest occupancy in August, September, October. If I'm seeing 33% occupancy, that's what the market's doing. And we know that like 80% of properties have either a terrible design, terrible photos, or terrible management, right? So we're doing better than majority of people already. So there's no reason like we can't be on the top end of this average and probably do 5 to 10% better than the average at least. That is my goal. And that's what I look at when I'm doing numbers. I'm like, okay, if the market's doing 33% and I want to be conservative, I can do at least 38% in August or September. On the higher months, we're probably going to get pretty close to 100% occupancy with maybe just a few days shy. So would be surprised if we got, 92%, 95, 96% occupancy. This just helps me get an idea of how my property can do throughout the year. So when I hear a lot of people stressed out in random periods of the year, like right now in Colorado, a lot of people are getting stressed because August has significantly slowed down compared to May, June, and July. It's everyone's going back to school, like things are starting to come down. It's just a kind of a slow month. It's always like that. If you came into your market dashboard, um, I say or AirDNA, everything in AirDNA you could pretty much find in here as well. It's just going to read a little bit different. So if you would see in here, if we were looking at Colorado, that it would also be a slow month for Colorado as well. Like you'd be able to identify that. So you shouldn't be, it helps set expectations, what I'm trying to say. So if you are expecting 100% occupancy in August, but the rest of the market has 46% occupancy, then that means if you're attempting to get 100%, then your rates are significantly low when you could probably have gotten double nightly rates and just had a little bit lower occupancy, lower cleaning fees, lower traffic. It's uncomfortable. I very much know that. I struggle with it. I go back and forth between, trusting the data and then wanting to see my entire calendar booked up. But at the end of the day, if we want to be in that top percentage of properties, we want to be really aggressive on our average daily rates, we need to understand what is even expected in our market. Um, Median booking window, this is going to be how far out people are booking. So in this case, in August in 2023, August 2024, August 2025, is that majority of people, like about 50% of people booked 25 days plus in advance, and the remainder of people will book, within 25 days. That's pretty much what it's reading. Median booking window. It's when are people going to book? 50% before, 50% after. That doesn't mean 50% of 100%. That's 50% of the expected 46%. And I'm pointing out 2023 just because that's the first line and the easiest probably for most people to follow. Median length of stay. This is also one of those things that's very market dependent. In this case, Bradenton's a very, very heavy vacation market. People on average do stay longer stays than they would in like, I don't know, Phoenix, Arizona. where people come and stay for like 2, 3 days. Like the average length of stay is probably 2 to 3 days, versus here where it's like 3 to 4 or even 4 to 5 in the summertime or in the high season more so. So you can see here in the high season, February, March, April, and even in the summertime, it's 5 day average length of stay or median length of stay, and 4 day towards the summer and heading towards the fall, heading towards the slow season. And then if we go into slow season, we're still looking at pretty much 4 in this market. But a lot of markets, you're going to see more of like 2 to 3. This is another site, a part of PriceLabs, where they have the training videos or training. If you go here to training, they do webinars. And I believe they talk about market dashboard like every other week. They go through and they talk about each of these features and what they mean and how to understand them. And they also have the recorded calls, and they also have them in YouTube as well. So I've watched them over and over and over to make sure that I actually understand the information provided. And then I go through every once in a while because I forget, because there's a lot of information that I don't always use. PriceLabs Market Dashboard is not a site that you need to use every day by any means. Like it's pretty, like, you get general information from it. It's like, okay, here's my seasons, here's what to expect for the next 3 months. Here's what my length of stay should look like. You get this basic information from it, and then you probably don't need to look at it for like another 3 months. I look at it pretty much quarterly. Okay, so next, it does give you an idea of some increased um, dates that are unexpectedly increasing. At this point, it seems a little bit late if I'm just not noticing that. I feel like by the time that PriceLabs notices, if I have not noticed, I've already missed the opportunity. I want to be proactive, and PriceLabs is reactive. They are not going to, if you use their automations or their recommendations, it's going to be reactive of what's happening in the market when we want to be able to see what's happening way before that. Okay, so this is future occupancy is mostly what I use this graph for, but you could kind of have, I don't know, I wouldn't use cancellation rate. I don't think this is a helpful tool, but you could come in here and see like, okay, 3.7% of people on August 13th have canceled. I don't know if that's helpful for anybody. I don't find it helpful for me. So I mostly use the occupancy option. I'm trying to look into the future and identify like where spikes are happening before they happen, right? Or when they're still very low. So in this case, let's find something that's not like a typical holiday. I mean, we can see that high season already. High season in this area, which is February and March, across the board, a majority of properties, 3 to 5 bedrooms, are 15 to 20 to 23% occupied already, right? So if I were to just be noticing this now, which is still, we're still like 6 months out, but still, that's 20% of people who are already booked. A lot of the time, that's going to be the people who are significantly underpriced, but it's also going to be for those top properties. Those top properties are already getting booked up. So I don't want to fall behind. And then all of a sudden it's 75% of people are booked, and I'm 3 months ahead and all my premium rates are done for. Sometimes you'll come in here and you'll notice, I don't know, like a random spike out of nowhere and a random date. And you're like, that's not graduation. That's not football. That's not high season. What is it? It could be like, I don't know, a Taylor Swift concert. But that's a huge help to be able to identify like what's going on. When I first started and they didn't have the market dashboard, I'd be on Ticketmaster, like looking at the next year's worth of events in every market that I was in and trying to figure out and get ahead of what's going on. Future prices, same thing. I use these together. And then what a lot of people I noticed too. Hmm, so- Okay, so what a lot of people do that I notice, they'll come into future prices and they'll look ahead of the time and they'll be like, great. So for February 22nd, my prices need to be, I don't know, like $500, $600. But they're like, why? What's going on at the period of time? It's best to understand what's going on, why are the prices increased for this day, and is it justified? So I like to go on that same, so that was February 22nd, February 22nd. So there's 22, 23% occupancy already for February 22nd. So that tells me that PriceLabs has enough data to even determine, like, yes, prices are probably sitting, like the top 90, 75th, 90 percentile is probably sitting in that $500 to $600 range. That makes sense. But let's see. In this case, it's pretty, so it was May 22nd. Wow, I was way off there. Okay, so May 22nd, Friday, May 22nd, the $500 to $600 range. Then we go to May 22nd over here. And it's not even showing yet. So in future prices, there is a spike from May 22nd, but based on what? 0.6% occupancy. So that is strictly based off of last year's pricing. And last year, there could have been an event on May 22nd that people are not booking for yet this year. So if you were to adjust your prices sky high on that particular weekend, but not understand what's bringing people or if anybody's coming, then that could be a missed opportunity to where if you set it for 600, maybe it could have booked for 350, but you're not anticipating what the data actually means, what's actually telling you. So make sure the data makes sense. Hope that makes sense for me to even say. So future occupancy, future prices, I'm gonna jump down here to future length of stay. This is future length of stay. So as we saw up here, let's go based off of um, New Year's, Christmas time. Obviously, there's a huge spike. We see that like almost 20% of people have already booked for 3 to 5 bedrooms in for Christmas and New Year's. So we come down here and we're like, okay, how long are those people staying for? How can I maximize for that? So come here to length of stay by date, which is, I wish it was called like future length of stay. And then we can tell here that based on December 30th, 26 reservations were made for 5 to 6 night stays. So there's already an increase, like a majority of people are booking 5+ nights for December already. So even though I have a 4 night minimum or a 3 night minimum for anything 90 days and beyond, for this specific period of time, people are booking longer stays in this area. So look in your area. How long are people staying? If you notice they're staying, like a majority are staying longer than, your minimum night stay, then you can go back in mm, and you can come over here to December and you can be like, okay, let's increase this to a 6 night minimum or a 5 night minimum. You want to attract like 70% of the crowd. But if only, let's go back to December, if only 11 reservations were made for 3 to 4 night stays and everything else is more, then why would you not try to advertise to those people? That's who you're trying to attract, people staying longer. Because even though the shorter stays have a little bit higher of a median booking price, what's going to happen, especially on a holiday, is they're going to book. So it was a 4 night stay, but let's say they had booked three, and then you have these like weekends open and you can't get them booked. In this case, you could still get this entire New Year's weekday open. But if you got 3 nights here and 3 nights here, then you have 3, 4 nights like available, and no one's going to book them because they're between two major holidays. So we're trying to balance, but also maximize. So I use all three of these graphs together to help me maximize each of my nights. So day of the week occupancy, day of the week prices is pretty self-explanatory. Again, you're not looking at the exact numbers. You are looking at just the difference in them. So we know we can expect in this market that there is going to be higher occupancy on Saturdays and Sundays than there would be on Mondays. And that's going to be for any market. In this market, let's say looking at Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh is probably like 85% weekend and 30% weekday. That's what you're going to see. Like this is considered a very vacation market, but in a more subtle market that has like business, vacation, family, school, hospitals, those ones are going to be more heavy weekend markets. Doesn't mean you can't get people in the weekday. It's just you really have to maximize for those weekends. If you're in those markets, then there's been evidence that people are doing well in those kind of markets as well. We went over this one last time. Again, I use 30 days and then booking by length of stay and booking window, identifying based on the last 30 days, how many people are booking for how long and how many days in advance. I'll go over it quickly. In this case, based on the last 30 days, there's been 67 reservations made for 1 night stays, 2 to 6 days in advance. So super last minute. 103 stays for 2 night stays, 2 to 6 days in advance. Super last minute. There is a mass amount of people that are still booking super last minute in this area. But I also do consider like, what's the chance someone's booking a 29 plus stay? Maybe one. Okay, that's not terrible information. But I'm mostly just looking at the top 3 to 4. What actually makes sense that somebody would be booking very last minute. Okay, so you're going to read it across the board. So if you're coming out to here and you're like, okay, a majority of people are booking 3 plus nights, even 4 plus nights, then why at 6 plus months do I not have a 4 night minimum or a 5 night minimum to help make sure I'm attracting those people? So these pretty much read the same. Well, they mean the same thing, they read differently, right? So for this one, this is based on the last 30 days. This is saying that there were 67 reservations that happened 2 days, 2 to 6 days in advance for a 1 night stay. So it's just a different way of reading it. This one makes the most sense to my brain. This booking curve, these are some new graphs that I haven't even seen before. And that's awesome. I love when they update their information. They have new data for us to take in, which just means I'm probably going to join one of their training calls so I can hear what they say about this information and how to best interpret it. Common amenities, these are just saying like what percentage of homes out of 3 to 5 bedrooms in this case have these amenities. 99.9% of people have a kitchen. Great. Um, Hair dryer, majority of people, these are the things you're absolutely going to want. Like if majority of people, 90 plus people have them, you're going to want those amenities. Desired amenities, what do they base this off? Amenities, long-term stays in demand. 62% of the listings have it, but 71% of the bookings are for such listings. So the amount of people searching for these things but do not end up getting a property with them. So they desire it, but they're unable to get it. Um, Policies and fees. So weekly discounts. It does say that, okay, this is again, it's where you're interpreting information, right? So it says that 39% of people do not have a weekly discount. Does that mean that 39% of people are getting bookings because of it? No, it does not mean that. The way that I interpret this information, if I were to be able to do a 16 to 20% discount or a 21 to 25% discount or any of these, that means I would be more competitive than all of these other people here. That's the way I read it. I want to be as competitive as possible as long as my numbers work. So in theory, it does say that the information that people with 0% discounts for week long stays have a decent conversion, not a great conversion, but have a decent conversion from bookings to from listing to booking. But what's the chance of that? How would that make sense? In this case, the best converting one is going to be right here. This 11 to 15% discount. So you have to really think about what actually makes sense. For monthly discounts, like where are they pulling this information from? It doesn't make sense. So I don't put too much weight on that. The only thing that I see is, okay, the more competitive, if I can be in this, we go back to drawing. If I can ignore this and be in like this part, then I'm going to be extremely competitive compared to if I were to be in this part. And information needs to make sense. This is for cleaning fees. It's insinuating that a majority of people that have good conversion are between the rates of in this market, between the rates of $231 to $276. And they have some of the best conversions. This tends to be like when Airbnb was still showing, cleaning fees, this was a lot more, this made sense because they can go on public information, they can see what your cleaning fee was, and they can see how many bookings you get in your occupancy. So it made sense. So this information still like for me, because they were able to see it, I'm like, okay, makes a little bit of sense. And I'd have to look at some of my other properties too. But this would be a good determination where if you I have a lot of people come to me when they first get their property and they're like, what should my cleaning fee be? How should I negotiate it? At the end of the day, when you go on Turno and you put out a bid, a majority of the cleaning fees are going to be pretty similar. And then there's going to be some outliers. Most of the time, the outliers offer additional services, or maybe they're just really busy and they're not looking to take on just every Joe Bob that comes around. but you'll be able to see a pretty good range of where your pricing is. In most markets, not really these vacation markets, but like, like Arvada, Pittsburgh, Phoenix, Indianapolis, like a 4-bedroom property is probably going to be anywhere from 180 to 220, $230. That's kind of like very normal. And then sometimes you're going to see it for 250, 280. That's also pretty normal. I know places in Bradenton that charge like 350, even though majority are paying this 230 to 270 because they offer like extensive services and check-ins and inspections and everything like that as well. Cancellation policy, just because everyone's doing it does not make it right. This is not telling you who is getting the best revenue by any means. This is not revenue based. This is just telling you how many people have a firm cancellation policy versus a flexible cancellation policy. So just because they have a firm cancellation, there's a lot of them that do, does not mean they're also a top performing property. In the beginning, I highly recommend being as flexible as possible with your guests. Airbnb wants to see that you're flexible. They want to see that you're guest friendly. They want to see that you're willing to adjust. And at the end of the day, like if a guest were to come, let's say you don't do a flexible policy, let's say you do a strict policy, and it's the day before, and the guest is like, for whatever reason, I can't go, and how dare you for not giving me a refund. If they call Airbnb, like a lot of the time, not every time, but a lot of the time, Airbnb will call you and say, hey, this person's asking for a refund. Are you willing to give them a refund, a partial refund? And they put it back on you. And if you say no, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, are they dinging your profile? Or are they not? We don't know. It doesn't look great. And sometimes they'll just overwrite it. Sometimes even if you say no, they'll do it anyways. So it looks better to be flexible. At the end of the day, guests all the time right now get their way anyways. And so it's like, why fight the system? Be flexible. You'll notice that if you were to try to go in and book a lot of the top properties, a lot of them are flexible. So this being, 8% of listings, 8.8% of listings makes sense to me because the top properties a lot of the time are going to be a little more flexible. The people who are being extremely stingy, like I see in these Facebook groups all the time, that people go in and they're like, what kind of cancellation policy I do? And every Joe, Bob, and Karen and everybody are like strict and I would moderate and this and like don't let anybody in that isn't willing to do this. I promise you they are not a top performing property if they are being that strict. You cannot be in favor of Airbnb's algorithm if you are going to just eliminate majority of your traffic that's coming through. You're not going to be a top performing property. Anyways, so it keeps going through. Be as guest friendly as possible. Just keep that in mind. And then number of guests, extra people. Interpret this information, understand what it means. It is not telling you revenue. It's not telling you top people. It is just giving you statistics on what is out there. Most people do not charge for extra people. A lot of first-time Airbnb hosts, they want to charge for every single person that comes in there. People are paying for a house. Doesn't matter if there's, one of them or 10 of them, they're paying for a large home. That is what it is. Unless you have an extensive amount of people, like if you have a 4-bedroom and you allow 16, you can probably charge after, 12 people. And when you charge, it's going to be like, you know, on average, it's probably $10 to $20 per extra person. That's what you're going to see. That's actually going to work. Not everyone's going to tell you the truth. A lot of people, if they see that you charge extra, they're just not going to say that they have extra. So you just have to take it as it comes. It's not worth upsetting people either. Now, obviously, if people are taking advantage, it's a different story. If they're clearly having a party, if they're inviting like an extensive, amount of people, then that's a different story. You call Airbnb. But It's not worth being all upset if you try to put an extra person fee and people don't abide to it, especially in your first 3 to 6+ months when you're just trying to gain traction. You can start being stingy when you have a top performing property and you've built that momentum and you're no longer relying on just Airbnb's algorithm. All right. Well, it doesn't seem like you guys asked any questions. We're a little bit over. I hope that was helpful. Um, and I'll see you guys next week.
Super helpful, Becky. Thank you.
Yeah. Talk to you later.